Welcome to Quack Co, the board game channel where every video is 10 minutes or less guaranteed.
Or double your money back.
Wes is going to be so happy you're continuing that trend. Yeah. This is Just the Tip Tuesday, and over the next few months, we're going to be bringing you tips and tricks or strategy guides, quick start guides for the various different factions in Mythic Mischief. One of our favorite little abstract games coming from Ivy Studios, a partner we work with quite often. So we thought we'd bring them some additional supplemental content to help you get this to the table as often as you can. These are going to be a combination of a quick rules overview, helping you walk through how the faction plays, some lore, because I think theme matters a lot, and of course, a nice deep dive into how we think it is best to play these factions. We'll typically do these after we've just spent some time playing, sitting down and playing a full gameplay of them on the channel, so our thoughts are as fresh as possible. Today we're talking about the monsters, which is Shira's faction specifically. Would you like me or would you like you to set up the flavor text?
I was going to set up the flavor text, but I was also going to give them a quick, 30-second overview in case you don't know what Mythic Mischief is. You're just wrong.
If they're watching this, they know what Mythic Mischief is, but go ahead.
It is an abstract puzzle where you can control both your pieces, your opponent's pieces, and the board. And you are trying to get your opponents caught by the Tomekeeper, who is making his way through the library, collecting his books, and putting them back. He has different locations he's going to have to go to, and you can manipulate him into catching his opponent, to catching your opponents. That is the essence of the game. And now for the flavor text. Monsters.
Just a quick overview of who the monsters are.
Bolt, Bash, and Beast are an all-star Bad Dream Scream team. This varsity crew of cadaver. Wow. Let's try this again. Bolt, Bash, and Beast are an all-star Bad Dreams Scream team. This varsity crew of cadavers reeks of body odor, rigor mortis, and deodorant spray. Hall monitors, beware, these monsters do not scare, and these three sporty spooks are dying for something to do.
So, let's start by setting up how the factions actually work and talk about then some of the strategy guides we have for them. Every faction is going to have the base abilities, which are going to be move yourself, and or
distract.
Move the Tomekeeper, which is pull him in your direction through the shortest possible route. Now, for you, you start with a 1 and a 2 in the movement zone, and you start with a 1 down here, or a blank actually, down here in your Move the Tomekeeper.
And you'll notice between the boards of the different factions, everyone has different numbers on top of them. So while it's still the same 5 squares, the ghosts have a lot more movement capabilities inherently. Yeah. So just something to be aware of when you're choosing your faction. So,
okay. How do the monsters overall play? And then let's go to the specifics of how their rules work.
The monsters overall are kind of these big burly things that push things out of the way and throw things over their shoulders. That's their essence. So their throw ability, when you are adjacent to another one of your enemies, either next to them or even diagonally, you can throw them over your shoulder or throw them onto the other side. So as you play the game, you're constantly looking for these situations where you can set yourself up to have a row of 3 spaces. You in one, your enemy in a diagonal, and an empty space, because if someone's occupying that space, it kind of sets you up for trouble.
You can cross the board very quickly with a strategic throw ability, but having that open space can be hard with some factions that move quickly or can manipulate the board very efficiently. Now, some important rules with that throw ability: you cannot throw, or you can throw onto a cluttered space, but you cannot throw over a bookshelf or directly on top of the Tomekeeper. So you can't force someone to be caught immediately, and you can't throw over a bookshelf, which is going to bring us down to the second ability that you have.
Well, if you had a corner per se, this is what it means. You cannot throw over a bookshelf. You can't be here and have your opponent over here and throw them here.
Yeah. You're going to want a lot of clear, open pathways towards the center of the board as you start figuring out what this board looks like, because of course you're going to be manipulating bookshelves and your opponent's going to be manipulating bookshelves. If they're not aware that you want a very open regional, like if you look at how the board is right now, you've got a lot of lines of 3 bridging here into the center, which is very advantageous to the monsters specifically.
Then going into their wall moving ability, it's called Barge, and essentially they have a space where there is a wall and they're kicking it outward. They're either kicking it outward against this wall or against this wall.
They're kind of giving it hinges.
Yes, essentially. It looks like a door ability, and so you have to be adjacent to the wall you're intending to move, and then you're moving it outwards, away from you onto the next spot. And so it's a little janky, not janky, but you have to kind of wrap your mind around that you're just moving it out as a door in either direction.
Now, the only 2 conditions that are here are going to be true for all the other factions in the game. You cannot completely close off a space, meaning there cannot be a space that is occupied solely by walls. And you cannot, what are you doing? Yep. And you cannot place a wall on the very outside of the board because that's a useless wall. Every wall has to be somehow blocking the center of the board and keeping at least one space open.
Yep.
Okay.
Now we can talk about.
So those are the core faction abilities. Now you've got your special ability.
Yep.
And then your after lunch ability.
This special ability is called Intimidate, and these are monsters, they're scaring you into everything they're doing. The Intimidate ability is a lot of fun, and if used correctly, you can for sure catch at least one, if not two people. Intimidate means a neighboring enemy moves 2 spaces towards the Tomekeeper. So I'm here, my neighboring enemy is here, and I just say, boo! And he walks 2 spaces towards the Tomekeeper. And I can make him walk in what kind of the shortest distance, but if it's equidistant, I can choose. And he walks 2 spaces towards the Tomekeeper. He cannot land in the Tomekeeper's spot. He just has to get next. He just walks towards the Tomekeeper.
Now, some important caveats here. They ignore the clutter rule, which is going to be true for a lot of the other character movement abilities.
Yeah,
Throwing them ignores clutter, forcing them ignores clutter. They're going to scramble on top of it, so you don't count that against you. And if they stop if they become adjacent to the Tomekeeper. So let's say you were in a position like this, and you wanted to say boo, you don't have to send them this far.
Yeah.
Instead, they will move 1 space, get scared by the Tomekeeper, and stop right there, dead-eyed like a deer in highlights, ready to be caught.
Boo!
Yeah, exactly.
And then my after lunch special, which I used a lot during our last game, and I had the best time with it. The after lunch special is a trap, and it is, where'd the token go? It is this little green token. This little green token you can place every single turn, once per turn, and it says trap an adjacent enemy. They cannot move on the following turn. You're essentially lining yourself up to someone at some point during your turn and saying, ha, you're stuck there. I like to use it a lot when I knew I wasn't planning on catching that specific enemy piece that turn. So if I knew that I wasn't going to catch him, but I didn't want him bothering me at all the next turn, I would place it down and have the Tomekeeper catching the other ones, because then that would leave my opponent to have to respawn them. If the Tomekeeper catches him and he's on that token, he gets respawned and the token's virtually useless.
You did make a really great play locking one of my faction pieces down onto a location that was one of the scoring objectives for the Tomekeeper.
Yeah.
Meaning that I had 2 full cycles of just not moving off that location. So you didn't catch him immediately, but you put yourself in a great position for the next turn because the Tomekeeper was walking in my direction, which was very frustrating. Now, some important caveats there. An enemy that is trapped can't move off the trap for 1 turn.
Yep.
But other abilities that are not called move can move one of your trapped pieces.
Yep.
So some of these factions, or some of your opponents, if you're playing a 4-player game, may still be able to grab someone, throw them, rip them. All these other faction abilities could manipulate someone on the board. Like, you could boo me in a trapped location and I would still run.
Yeah.
But I can't move myself. So that's an overview. That's some flavor text. Shira, what is some tips and tricks, some thoughts around the actual strategy of playing the monsters, and when would you choose to play the monsters?
Like you were talking about before, having that middle board kind of opened up. That's something that I always look for with the monsters, and then with the wizards is another one that needs a line of 3 for some of their abilities. I like those factions that I'm looking at the overall space on the board and lining things up. I don't necessarily like the monsters against the ghosts with fast-moving factions. The monsters don't end up getting a lot of movement, and so having someone who's moving less and having less monumental board shifting capabilities is probably helpful.
Now, if you're playing second player and you get that first tome, where are you probably going to assign? I know it's faction dependent. It depends on who you're playing against, if you need more movement or anything. But
faction dependent.
What do you like building up when it comes to the monsters? What do you find useful?
I mean, this is my go-to for most of the factions is their distract. I like being able to lure and call that Tomekeeper whichever direction I want. I usually have my pieces on opposite sides of the board, and so calling that Tomekeeper using different pieces ends up catching a lot of my opponents.
So one of the things I would consider with the monsters is if you have a board that's very open, build up your throw ability. If you have a board that is not very open from the very get-go, build up your barge and then your distract ability.
Yeah, and barge open the board.
Either open the doors yourself or just focus on actually manipulating the Tomekeeper as opposed to throwing other people. If you're not able to throw people, it can become very frustrating very quickly.
Yes.
So that's our thoughts on the monsters. Thank you for watching this quick Quack Co video. Now get out and play that game.
less time watching means more time playing. See you next time.